I mean, I guess you could say that the purpose of writing an essay, to go down this route in particular, and maybe the purpose of like learning about the purpose of learning anything, but in particular when you're growing up and going to high school and through university, is not necessarily about writing the best essay. It's about how to think about writing an essay, right? So you develop these skills of critical thinking, let's say. How do I think about an argument? How do I present my thoughts in a clear way? And humans, will still need to do that forever. I mean, it's always valuable to know how to think clearly. So I guess you could make that argument, but there's something depressing about, like, if I was a high school student, my teacher was like, can you go write this essay and compare these two things? And I knew that there was this tool out there that could do that way faster and better than I could at that moment. That would be a hard thing to swallow and to go do as a rebellious teenager, let's say.
Yeah, I I agree, but I actually think that points to a problem with the way that we're treating education, because what's the point in getting you in giving you an assignment like compare these two philosophies or compare and contrast these two kind of viewpoints, like as a question, like as a task to take on. Like, what's the point of doing that?
I would say, if I were answering that question, the point is so that you can learn learn how to think about two opposing ideas and compare them. So, like, the practical, there are times in life where two things that are opposing are true, and it's helpful to be able to, like, kind of separate yourself and look at, like, make the best possible argument for one case, let's say, like Steelman one side and then Steelman another side. If I were playing devil's advocate and answering your question, what do you think it is?
Well, I think you're spot on. Like, it's about developing those skills in the student, but it doesn't have a purpose beyond that, right? It doesn't have there's not an artifact at the end that you create beyond just the essay. But I think all students can see through that, where it's just like, okay, it's an essay, because that's what I just have to do at school, which is completely different than, maybe writing an essay, which is trying to say, like, what would Nietzsche say about our rapid uptake of artificial intelligence into our workflows or something. Like, that's a question you could pop into ChatGPT, I think. And if you're not an interested student, then that's what you would do. But if it's a question that you're genuinely interested in, I don't think that ChatGPT would ever satisfy me. Like, I think that's, we want to think about problems like that. Not necessarily that problem, but, everyone's got their own problems that they like to engage with. That's, it's why we do crosswords and wordles and all that stuff. Like, we enjoy that. There's something, from an evolutionary perspective, that's important for us to engage with problems like that on a recurring basis. And so I think from an educational point of view, if anything, ChatGPT is just going to expose the futility of getting people to do assignments for the pure purpose of developing a mindset. I think it's the opposite way around. Like, the mindset comes from trying to solve a problem that you actually care about. It's just along for the ride. We're pulling the cart before the horse, I think.
I just had this thought as you were speaking, that maybe what will end up happening is that you'll end up getting graded on like the prompts will become more important to think about for students, right? Like, maybe the assignment is get Chat GPT or whatever AI is we're working with at that time to produce some sort of creative essay, and what becomes more important are the inputs for the student. Like, how do you ask the right questions? How do you get creative with them? and then the output to a point where like the output is actually interesting. You know, like I'd be fascinated to hear Nietzsche's take on how AI is going to impact us, even if it's completely artificially generated. That would be an interesting thing to read. So I could imagine,
Right.
like,
Or,
yeah,
yeah. Or like the assignment is to hand in your conversation,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like the conversation itself is in a way a piece of like an educational asset, let's say, or something like that. It's just in a different format, right? Like an interview with a band in a student magazine or something. You know, they've got those like question answer formats.
yeah,
Yeah, that would be really cool. And then yeah, what you're developing there is um, the ability to ask good questions, which is again a product of like thinking clearly and mapping the problem out, you know, in your mind. Yeah, it's gonna be so interesting to see how it all unfolds.